Andrea Gribble. I am so excited to have you here today. If you are going to bond soon, or if you're at least a public school and need to be able to ask at some point for money and support from your community, you want to listen. Kathleen brings so much energy and talking about how these questions are really all about benefiting kids. She's got so many great examples. She's going to share a little bit of her journey into school PR and her work that she now does with schools all around the country. We're going to talk about the probably the most important aspect of a bond or referendum question, and that is the research that goes into it. And it's talking to your community and getting feedback. We're going to talk about the mistakes schools make. We're also going to talk about how to, gather that feedback. And then we're going to talk about really how do you talk about this complicated subject in an easy way for people to really understand the impact. And I'm just so excited because you're going to have so many practical ways of doing this. So we'll get started in just a minute. Talk about practicality and helpfulness. My book, Social Media for Schools, is out. It was just released in 2023, and I hope that you've grabbed your copy. If you haven't, head on over to socialschoolforedu.com/book. I am really proud to say that I have 24 5-star reviews on Amazon. I have no other numbers, nothing below a 5. Not that this book is perfect, because I'm sure there's still a lot of room for improvement, but there's such valuable feedback on there. So if you are wondering if you should get the book, go check it out. Go check out some of those feedback and ratings, because I think that will really help make a decision. This is a go-to resource for your side of your desk, so that when you get caught on something, you can quickly look up, what are some of the best strategies for schools with social media, because that's what the book's called, Social Media for Schools, right? So check that out today. Now we've got a great episode, but let's get into a quick K-12 PR tip. All right, today's K-12 PR tip is all about AI and getting engagement with your mascot. Milton School District, Carrie is a member of our membership group. I know that she was actually, I think, on one of the podcast episodes as well in the past, so you can look that up. But she put together some AI options of their mascot, and she's actually asking for the community to pick from 4 options in regards to the new profile pic that they're going to use on their page. And so she's really teasing it out with some posts out on social media. I'm looking at the Instagram pages right now, and basically just saying, hey, this is option 1, or this is option 2, this is option 3, and option 4. And then they're going to put out a little poll at the end of the week to drive, hey, you got to pick for one now. Which one are you voting for? You guys, AI is a great tool. And I don't want everybody changing their branding with AI to make things complicated. This is just a really fun play on getting your fans and your followers to engage with your social media accounts. And guys, like, that's what it's all about. That's about getting more eyeballs on the stories, everyday stories from your school. So this is just a really unique idea. I will make sure to link to it in the show notes so you can get this for you. You can think of a lot of different ways to use this. It doesn't have to just be your mascot. But when you ask people to make a decision to help, almost choose your own adventure, right? That, the winning result is going to get, you're going to take action on that. It's really fun for your followers, and it'll build the engagement. It'll build more followers, and it'll build more excitement for your school. So check out in the show notes. I've got a link to a few of these posts and their final voting option from Milton. Check that out. And now let's get into all things bonds and all things really making it a little bit more fun. Let's get with Kathleen now. Welcome to the podcast, Kathleen.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to discuss bonds today.
Yeah, not everybody has that same excitement. You know,
No, they don't.
it's just like bonds. It's all they see is like hours and hours and hours of work on top of everything else. But I'm really excited because 'tis the season. On November 7th, 2023 is voting day here, and I know a lot of listeners are going out to ask their voters for support. If they aren't now, they probably will be at some point. So this is going to be a great episode for them to listen back to. But before we dive in to all of the things, I would love for you. It's Kathleen Kennedy, APR. You're out of Oklahoma, right?
I am.
Yeah. So just share your background and kind of your role and how you serve schools.
So I have been working in school communications for 23 years. And a friend of mine, back when I worked for a nonprofit, was like, I think you'd be really good in working in schools. And I'm like, what do they do? Like, why do they need someone? And then my first day I got hired, and then my first day on the job, we fired a teacher. And I was like, wow, this is going to be really interesting. So, um, and then and then not only was it interesting, but it became a passion, and it is a calling that's been placed on my heart. And I love serving schools, and I love serving kids. The bottom line for me is to be able to promote the value of education for all children. And that for me, there's nothing beyond that that means more than making sure that I can help be a voice for school districts, the ones I've either worked for personally or now as a business owner, and all I do is serve public school districts.
Okay. So you started out with a school,
Mhm.
and maybe worked in several districts. And then what did you go to school for? Did you go to school for communications? I mean, or
I did. I
okay,
actually started out with the hope and dream of being a TV anchor a long time ago. And I did work in television and radio for, oh, I don't know, 3, 4 years. And I found out pretty quickly that I hated it. I hated the 24/7 news cycle that started back in the 80s and 90s. And it was like sucked the life out of me. It sucked all the joy and the passion that I had. It was gone. And so I wanted to find something a little more aligned with my values of serving and knowing that I was doing something for the good. And not to say that journalism isn't for good. I don't disagree
right.
with that, but it wasn't for me, and it
Yeah.
didn't align with my core purpose. And so then I found my way into PR through the nonprofit, and then through my friend, and that's kind of how I got there. And I worked for Oklahoma City Public Schools for 7 years, and I led the communications team there. And that was where we had a massive bond that had been passed in our school district. And it was called Maps for Kids. And it really generally, like, it touched every building in the district, and we got to promote it on the backside. And so seeing how you actually start from the beginning and working back, um, is interesting too. Like, so you're in the trenches of construction and promoting all the good things that are going on, but how do you then use that as a motivator to start in your beginning of a bond cycle and working with what you need? And so that was really fascinating to me because it was all science driven. Understanding the needs and understanding what your community wants is science driven. And
Right.
basically works on our PR structure for and when I'm so old that it's the race formula for me, rope for others, right, whatever, all the
Our pie, yeah, our
our
pie.
pie, yeah. So
Uh,
so I'm old, and that's how it was. But it really fascinates me that there's data that goes along with it that helps drive the decision making, and it's so cool. And the interactions of your community engagement, and so that was fascinating.
yeah.
And then along with that, it just boils down to what's best for kids. That's your bottom line. And so I loved it. I loved working for schools. And Oklahoma City was really the catalyst for me. I actually thought I'd retire there. Instead, I got fired from there. And I
Wow.
know, right? Like, well, that happens in large urban school districts when you have a leadership change. So I was really tied in with that superintendent. And so 5 of us were let go at the
Okay.
top. And I was like, oh, what am I gonna do next? And then I saw the need. That was almost 7 school years ago. And so I started a firm, and I started my own firm working with just school districts, and I love it. Like, I'm doing what I love. And now
Yeah.
I'm not just doing it for one district, I'm doing it for multiples.
Okay. We have a similar story, Kathleen, because we both, I lost my job and that's how I landed up and ended up in this role too. Although I had no idea what I was doing when I started, and you certainly did when you started off on your own. I just really want to quickly go back to the science-based RPI and race, just because if somebody's listening and you have no idea what we're talking about, could you, and you have your APR, which is accreditation in public relations. And so there are some, it's a framework that really helps build your communication. So can you just explain those for our listeners?
I would love to, because it really drives a solid public relations program. And, you know, as we work with administrators who are also driven by data and research, then it helps solidify our position within a school district, or the need for PR and communications programming in a school district. And so research is the R, and then you go and you look at both quantitative and qualitative data to help support your position of why you might need to move forward on something, either a theory that you have, or whether or not you need to validate what you're going to do. And then also for a basis in how you're going to actually look at the outcomes at the end. So you want to make sure that you are looking into that research, and then you're coming up with your analysis and putting together your overall campaign, what you're going to do and your approach, and then developing your communication plan and executing it. Um, so it's a strategic formula into looking into all of those areas, and then the execution, and then of course you're going to evaluate it. And in a bond, the evaluation is the number of people that turn out and your voters, right? Did it pass or did it fail? But in PR world, and I love this about PR, is that just because you fail, or things didn't go the way you wanted them to, doesn't mean that you actually failed, if you want to put quotes around it.
Yep.
Um, so you would say, where can I go back and make an adjustment? And if you win too, what would you differently next time? It's a chance for looking at improvement. And it's that full cycle of always, how do you improve and how do you get better?
Yeah. So I just want to give you a little story. So when I've been working with schools now for 10 years, and I remember our first, we call them referendums in Wisconsin, and the first referendum that I was involved with failed, and we're just responsible for social media posts. So I thought it was like totally our fault. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, they're gonna like get rid of our service because we're basically doing social media to celebrate the everyday things. But through that process, I learned so much. And, just talking about all of that planning and that research, I mean, it really goes back to asking the right question. Because if you are not asking the question that is going to gain support, then you're bound to fail. And us as school communicators feels like on our shoulders, we take things so personally. But I guess, you now with 23 years of experience, me now with 10 years of experience, very easy for me to realize that. But I think early on, it's not that easy, right?
It still hurts though. Like, you take it with a little bit of a dose of because you put so many hours, and you led with that, right? Like, I love this work. I mean, I love bonds. Um, but you invest, I mean, hundreds of hours of your time in a bond referendum to get it passed. And so you can't not feel the pinch if you lose. And I've lost some. But when you go back to that analysis and the evaluation, like where did we misstep? What were we missing? There's always a way to find what you could have done better, what you could have tweaked, what you missed along the way. And I think that's the other piece is too. It's a fluid. When I work with school districts, I keep things pretty fluid. Is you always want to be looking out for signs of something that's moving a different direction so you can go back in there and address it like head on while it's happening rather than after the fact. So that's part of that beauty of a campaign and when you're in it. But yeah, you still feel the pinch. So
Yeah, we're all human, right? We
yeah,
are all
yeah,
human.
I love
So
that because
how exactly do you mainly work with schools in Oklahoma, or do you work with schools all over?
everywhere. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
So what kind of experience and what does the process look like when you help a school with a bond? Can you just kind of explain that?
Yes. And I love this because sometimes school districts want to pull me in after they've already done the planning side of and they've got this package together. They know what their buildings they want to redo or new builds, new construction, technology, whatever the pieces that they're putting into their pie, right? Um, and so in some of those cases, you have less ability to work with the community and the voters on what they want. So at that point, you're locked in legally to what you've put on the ballot and you can't change it. So it's up to us to then try to motivate the voters based on the information and the education platform that you're putting together of here's why you should support it rather than the beginning where you are in that planning stages with your architect or your facilities planner, like doing a study about your demographics and your growth patterns, right? Like we use that information as a communicator to help develop strategy on the communication side, also in helping us align with whether the package you're putting together aligns with what your community thinks you need.
Right.
And if
Yeah.
you're not listening, then you could fail, even if you bring me in like after you've already locked it in. Like I'm not, I can't throw a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can, but it's a lot of luck at that point rather than strategy. And so strategy out of the gate and that listening and the feedback is very strategic when you partner with us in the very beginning.
Okay. And the name of your company is?
The Center for Communication and Engagement.
Okay. So the for Communication Engagement, I'm assuming you work beyond bonds as well, but today we're focusing on bonds.
Yeah.
And would you say that you work with a lot of schools that don't have a communications person at all? Or
Mhm.
are you a mixture of both?
I do a lot of work with school districts that don't have someone on staff, but then it's surprising when it comes time to do your pass your bonds. I work with a mixture of both
Okay.
because I'm a part of the team, and because the people that are in the district know how much time it sucks from you.
Yeah.
It's just we are that piece of the team that helps put those pieces together, and that takes a lot of the pressure off the person in the district and their plate. So we can do both.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd love to break down, and you've already started getting into it, but I'd love to break down some of the key areas that school districts get wrong when it comes to planning for a bond.
Mhm.
And again, you've probably already alluded to some of that, but just, I mean, if somebody is if they're going to vote in November 7th this year, and they're
Yeah,
just listening to this and are going to take away some key takeaways, probably not going to be super helpful, but going forward,
right?
hopefully they can put some of this to work. So what are
Yeah.
those key mistakes?
So some of those are not being in tune with your community and not listening, not really listening, giving them an opportunity to talk about what they see as their vision. There's not that's not saying that you can't help shape that vision by providing information, but when you say that you need a new turf field and they have said 3 previous times you do not need a turf field, you probably shouldn't put that on your ballot again. It's coming back with something that's repackaged and looks a little different, is not listening to your community. So
Hmm.
it's getting into and having a dialogue with them and listening to their feedback, and then shaping a bond issue around their thoughts and their vision, and aligning it with yours and making sure everybody's in the same page moves you forward, and it sets you up for long-term success. So you have I see more success for districts who have a vision, not just on the current bond that they're working on, but a long-term planning process as well.
Right.
So you have more ability to work with your community in that long-term capacity, to shaping your future, than you are with just like bringing something that's failed again a couple times because you know you need it. It's not your community doesn't know you need it.
Right. So what would be some of those ways that you can try to listen to the community? Because it sounds like common sense, like you need to listen to what they want. But
Right.
we have a big community, and sometimes the only people we hear are the loudest ones that are, against everything we do. So, what are some of those methods?
I love that because so most of the school districts that I work with, we put together feedback groups, whether
Okay.
they are like a superintendent's advisory committee or a bond advisory committee. And then you also facilitate community planning meetings as well, where you have an opportunity for a large group of people to come in. And in the last couple years, I've actually changed my methodology and my approach to how I put together community feedback meetings. I have taken some leadership programming, and I have learned how to flip those focus group meetings on its head, like to make them very productive instead of just hearing from those loud voices and
Yep.
just hearing from the oppositions. So by being able to divide those groups up into their operating style. And I say that is that we each have our own operating style and where we come from. So some of us are driven from a promoter atmosphere, like we promote things. We're always game for whatever. You can see us because we've always got smiles on our faces or whatever. Then you have a very analytical group of people, right? They are constantly the science, the data, the nerd, like those are those, and they maybe their closets organized from right to left by color blocks and short sleeves, middle sleeve, like everything is organized in their life. So, and then you've got controller people. Those are a lot of the superintendents who want to control everything. But your presidents of companies, or they're very much in control of everything and how everything looks in their life. They've got like this perfectionist attitude. And then you have supporters. This group of people are they want everybody else to win. They're not really concerned with themselves. That's a lot of our teachers in our school districts. But
Mhm.
when you break these people into their four groups and then you move them out to talk in their small groups, they have better dynamic and amazing conversations than they would if we put all four of those people together in one group.
Okay.
So we're able to hear from the real quiet voices or the analytical voices that don't speak out in large meetings. But
Okay.
they very much have an opinion to say, that they want to bring to the table. And this allows for a better facilitation. And I have been using this for the last 2 years, and it has transformed some of the work I've been doing. And I love it. I love seeing it at the beginning of a process, especially in a bond process with a community that's maybe had some controversy before.
Okay. And then, as far as like feedback groups and these facility planning meetings, do you ever get into just doing a survey, like just,
Yep.
a form
Oh,
survey where they're answering questions, in
100%. Yep.
prioritizing needs and things like that?
Mhm.
Okay.
100%. You wanna do both. You wanna do qualitative and quantitative,
Okay.
um, measures of your community to find out where everybody is. And then also you can test your messaging too, right? Like, as far as, like, what you might put on the at your ballot as a proposal. So your prep messaging, um, you're looking at what works with people, what's not gonna resonate with people. And so it's a great place to be is in that planning stage.
Yeah. Now, some people, Kathleen, Probably not, maybe not the growth mindset people, but some people are going to be like, this takes way too much time. I don't
Hmm.
have time to do all of this.
Hmm.
And I would absolutely say you have to make time for this, because if you don't, you're going to waste the rest of your time on asking a question that's not going to be supported anyways, right?
Right? It is 100% worth your time and investment, unless you want to repeat it and do it again. Because then
Right.
you waste even more time when you have to go back and do it again the right way the first time. I was telling you earlier, my dad just passed, but one of the lessons that he taught me from a very early age is do it right the first time. He hated to waste time, and I'm very much like him. I hate to waste time. Like, why don't we just do it right the first time? Because it saves us the time and energy the later on down the road.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. This is great advice, and really goes along with everything that I've learned from the awesome school communicators that I've been surrounded by in the last 10 years. Now, one challenging thing is, and that goes back to the title of this episode, which is humanizing the needs and staying out of the weeds,
Yes.
how to pass your school bond. So
Mm.
when you're communicating about a complicated subject, and some of these things are complicated, what are some things that we need to remember?
I love this part. I love it because it's not only bonds or and tax referendums, levies, whatever your terminology is in whatever state you're working, because I've worked in a lot and they're all different. But the bottom line is it's about kids, and how do you translate those dollars and the taxes back into children, right? Some people are lucky they don't have to have a tax increase, right? Some
Mhm.
are not so lucky, and you're looking at it like a 16% or a 20% tax increase, even a 5%, like it doesn't matter. When you're having an increase, you get to explain how it will benefit your children, and what the impact is on their life, or the teachers in the building, right? How does it impact? And so what I like to do is to break that down into having parents talk about the value of having a safe school entry, or in Oklahoma we have tornadoes that come sweeping down the plains all the time, right? Is what is the value of having a storm shelter, right? And why do we need it? And there's a lot of people that have experienced it firsthand, and those are really great spokespeople that can humanize and put the authenticity around why you need something. And then you talk about the cost. Now, when I talk about breaking down cost, I never really just get into the weeds of what taxes look like, rather than, if you were to cut out a Happy Meal at McDonald's, right? Once a month, you could pay for the cost of the increase of your taxes. It's
Right.
very digestible for people when you can break it down into their everyday language.
Now I'm hungry, Kathleen. Now I want to now I want a Happy Meal. Um, this is really good. So I love, relating the proposal to the impact on kids. One of the things that I think about, because I'm sure you've asked all sorts of questions, but sometimes you want to add another gym. People are like, that only benefits the athletes and whatever. So like just in my thinking, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but talking about the ability to add another gym,
Mhm,
because this many athletes, and having to stagger practice times
mhm,
impacts dinners, it impacts a lot of families, kids having to stay after school and maybe not getting home until 8 o'clock at night.
mhm.
I mean, I'm assuming like that would be something that you could then talk about
Oh
to
yeah,
relate it back to how it impacts kids.
100%. But you know what else it impacts?
Yeah.
It impacts the ability of the school district to add another level of availability to host events for the community. So it's
Yeah.
driving economic development in your community and economic growth. So when you have a community event that can be hosted in your extra gym when it's not being used, right?
Yeah.
You have now you're driving like if you can host cheer competitions or band competitions, you're driving people from other districts into your city, and
Yep.
they're buying gas on their way out, they're stopping at restaurants, they're stopping at the convenience store, they're shopping locally. It is driving economic development too. So it's twofold, right? You're also benefiting the kids in the community, but you're driving that local small business who's counting on people to come through the community.
That's a really good point because I don't know what your stats are, but we kind of use the 70% of your community doesn't have a direct tie to the school anymore, meaning they don't have kids that attend the school
Right,
anymore.
right.
But is that similar to what you have
It is
found?
very similar all over, just
Oh,
generally as a rule of thumb. Yeah, it is a huge, well, and also the people that vote
yeah,
aren't typically people that have children in school either. They may have grandchildren in
right.
schools, and but the typical people that vote regularly is another key word, because you've
Okay.
got to
Yeah.
make sure who
But it's
they are.
important. But it's important to be able to show them how it impacts them as well. So
Yes,
I like
yes,
that.
uh-huh, and the impact on their, housing values, right, depending on where they're
Yeah.
located, and so good
Yeah.
schools and good housing values, right?
Yeah. I always too say, and I think from a communicator standpoint, and I'm sure some of you that are listening are like, I'm not a designated communications person, but this got thrown on my plate. Now I have to help with this referendum. But
Yeah,
my thing is like, if you can't like explain and understand what information you're sharing, then do you really want to put that out there for people because people are going to have questions. So really breaking it down into those simple terms, it
yes,
doesn't mean that you think your community is not intelligent enough to understand it, but it's important to put it in terms that make sense to drive that decision to either vote yes or no, right?
yeah. I have superintendents tell me they don't understand bonds. Like, they don't understand the complexity of the finance side, and it's difficult. It is a challenge to explain. If you, as a superintendent who've gone through classes and training on it, don't understand it, how is anyone underneath us going to understand it as well? Unless you're a financial expert, got the economy down, which I don't know that anyone does, but it's like, so the ability to break things down to the very basic, but also the touching on the human side. Anytime you can relate it to the human core and why it supports our mission, that is where we are able to connect with people on an empathy level. And that's where we want them to vote from. We want them to also to be able to vote from doing things that's right for children.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just think about, obviously this is the social media, kind of podcast for schools. And,
Mhm.
we use social media to drive up that trust and that transparency so that when you have to ask, and not that it's just communicated through social media, it's communicated in a lot of ways, but when you do have to ask, there's that trust already built up that they
100%.
know that you're going to be, that what's going on and you're going to make the right decisions and all of that.
Yeah.
So
I'm
we
working
were
with one of my communities right now on that, building the trust kind of thing. We
okay.
have not announced that we're going to be running a bond issue, but I am leading into that. And I'm subtly leading into that by pointing out some of the facilities right now, and
Yep.
and how we could do more if we had, like with different facilities and the new technology that's available, and then the way they design buildings now to versus what we did in the 70s. And so we're setting the tone and the stage and the credibility for the superintendent, right? That he's the education expert and he knows what they need to look like in order to facilitate that better academic success. And so you're setting that stage, and you can lend your voice to it even well before you get into that planning stage.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we've hit on a lot, and I just want to kind of ask this question to conclude, although we could talk all day. But what are some of the best strategies that you've had schools use when it comes to social media and bond campaigns. So maybe there's two or three ideas that have a really, and you've probably already explained them a little bit, but social media wise, we can't usually say vote yes. Like we
No.
can't say that, right?
Mm-mm.
So you're putting things out there. So what are a few of those strategies?
Well, video is one. I love using video in social media. It's key to telling those stories, and it's better when you have almost a testimonial of someone who is in support of the service that you're going to have on your bond issue, whether it is a cheer parent or band parent, whatever that is going to be benefiting from that bond, or um, one of the ones I used that was instrumental in helping us was a parent whose child died in a tornado at a school. And they were the heart and soul of our campaign, right? Because they were talking about that loss and how personal it is. And why wouldn't we do something to make that avoidable when we have the opportunity in front of us, right? And
Yeah,
so using that person, that personal touch point in social media, and you can use it as their picture and a quote. I mean, it's as
yeah,
simple as that, to be able to humanize that social media piece for the school district to tell their story. It's just all about telling a story, and you tell it in those social media pieces.
yeah. And as far as a cadence to that, I mean, how often are people posting that on their social media channels? Do you have a general rule of
You
thumb?
asked that, yes, because you start out slowly dripping
Yep,
at the very beginning, because you don't want to overwhelm people when it's not top of mind, right? Top of mind is like 2 weeks out for me.
okay,
That's when we're infusing people with information. Now we're dripping it right into a starting out with a slow drip, I would say, like every other day when they call for the bond. And then we
mhm,
have it as well. It all comes back, and it all cycles back to our website as well, where you're
mhm.
keeping a live updated
Yes,
FAQ. And then also all your social media posts are there too for people to find, so that if they missed it, they can find it online. So it's double downing with your information. But it's like a repository of everything that you're putting out. But on your social media, we start with the slow drip, and then we get into that high paced, even like 2 days, 3 days out. I am 4 or 5 posts in. On the day of, I do about 7. And
okay,
like, you got 2 hours left before the polls close, right? And it goes down to actually a minute past the polls closing, and then I thank people immediately. Like, a thank you goes a long way. Like, whew, we have gotten all this work, and you're like feeling it, right? But you got to thank every single person in your community who took the time to become educated, that voted, that helped knock doors, that, whatever the case was. Just thank them from the bottom of your heart for being out there and being a part of your community, and knowing that your commitment to kids is why that they came to the table. And so um that's my 7:01 post, or whatever time your polls close wherever you guys are. um
okay. That's great. So, Kathleen, I already have 2 pages of notes. I can't imagine what our listeners have. And again, I know we could keep talking.
yeah.
Now, if somebody has an additional question that I didn't get a chance to ask today, what's the best way to stay connected to you?
Well, you can email me, you can reach out to me through our website, okcce.com, or you can just give me a call. You can put my cell phone number on there, and
Okay, I will. I'll because we've got our show notes, and so
yeah,
I'll
just
have your
include it.
email, your
Yeah.
website, and then your phone number. We'll
Mhm.
include all of that on the
And
show notes. You guys reach out to Kathleen, whether or not have to end up bringing her on to help you, or you just got a general question. What a delight it's been to talk about all of these things. And you do bring a certain light, and it's like an energy to this process versus, oh, what we have to do. It's what we get to do. And it's all about kids. And so
yeah.
I really appreciate your perspective today.
Thanks so much for having me. I love it. I love being a light for kids. Um,
Yes.
that is the voice we get to have, and I'm proud to do the work I do every day.
Yes. Well, thank you for leaning into it. And thank you, everyone, for listening today. if you're going to vote soon, or whenever you're listening to this, we want to wish you luck.
Yes.
No, it's not all on your shoulders, right? There's a lot of things that go into it, but we will see you again next week with another great episode. Thanks so much, Kathleen.
Bye.